I just want to bring to your attention that I do have a little check mark, and anywhere that I post or comment will show this little check mark on this platform. I guess that's why they made this little check mark. Anyways, I hope you're all doing well. Today we're going to look at something that I find really amazing. Thanks for being here. God bless, and welcome. I'm not sure how to share this, but I'm very excited about it. An astronomical share about our realm. I've seen lots of eclipses, photographed them, and have been baffled about the luminaries since I was a child. I've always stared at the sun. Nobody ever told me not to, until it was way too late. And something that always perplexed me was how the moon doesn't really look like the moon during an eclipse. It looks more like some black orb just passing in front of it. And after the last eclipse, I was very excited and frantically combed the internet looking for images, and I felt like I was just getting a bunch of BS images. And now I realize that I was. There are real images, and if I would have been prepared, I could have taken some myself. I have photos, but no video. In past videos, I've shown you a video that I've taken of the sun and moon right next to each other in the sky, and the moon having a big shadow, a crescent, or sometimes half, making no sense when the sun is right next to it, just blasting it. Should be full and it should change. Shouldn't just be the same lunar cycle all day. If they're both visible in the sky, the shadow on the moon should change. But no, all day we're in the particular waxing or waning cycle, like it's fixed. Recently I've shared depictions of an old astronomical clock in Prague, and through editing and whatnot, I've watched this clock more than most people should, just watching it spin. And I noticed there's an opposing orb, and it got me thinking that there's something else. And even this clock showed it. Something else that has nothing to do with the moon, that eclipses the solar luminary. And it really is so. When the student is ready, the teacher appears. Shortly after, somebody gave me a link in the comments for my last video, and I thank you for this. And it's from a channel called Oliver Ibanez, a Spanish channel. And finally, some real pictures and video and a plausible theory to what the eclipse may be. And I'm going to try to share this as true to the creator of the video as possible. And I'll leave his link below. So here we can see an image of the eclipse. And they talk about how the eclipses have been predicted for thousands of years. The Chinese having it down to a science. And it just happens so fast. As it approaches it, it seems baffling. That, again, there is no shadowing seen on the moon. It's like some black spot just rolls in and then moves out. And last time I saw this eclipse, I was working at the hospital that I worked at for 5 years, and we all went outside and looked at it, and I couldn't see the moon before and I couldn't see it after. It just happened so fast and I was so perplexed. Everything got really cold, and he talks about these predictions in an old book called The True System of the Universe by James Giuseppe. And this is very exciting because this is an old science, and we have to remember that NASA and all the stuff they feed us is very new science that disregards all of the wisdom of the past. And here we're zooming in a little closer, and come on, use your head. Any artist in school will learn to draw shadowing around a spherical object. This is not a normal spherical object. It would have a different shadow over here, and the shadow would change as it moved. And even as it sat fixed in this position, we would see a great amount of light. We would see some shadowing. And the darkest spot would be right here in the center, not the whole thing. And again, even when there's no eclipse, when the sun and moon are in the sky together, the shadow of the moon should change throughout the day. Here's a paper written in 1897 by Thomas Ferguson, and he foretells the eclipses so accurately, and this was done again by the Chinese thousands of years ago. And I've talked about how I believe the Chinese wisdom comes from the past great civilization that built this realm, that built it in a way that we don't and can't build today. The ancient Chinese wisdom encompasses everything, every science, sciences that we don't even know should be sciences in the West. And I'm just very excited how it always seems to come back to this. It seems to come back to the Yellow Emperor, who overnight brought all these sciences and wisdom to China, or Tartaria, as it was before China. And here was a perfect way to predict the eclipse that I'd never heard of, written by Sir Robert Ball in a book called The Story of the Heavens. And he said if we look at all the eclipses in a period of 18 or 19 years, we can predict with enough accuracy all future eclipses. It's only necessary to know that within 18 years and 11 days after an eclipse, a similar one will occur again. This is the rule that allowed ancient astronomers to predict eclipses. So simple. And the truth is always so much more simple than a lie. And I think you're going to be very excited when you see what this eclipse is. Samuel Robotham, in his book, wrote the simplest method of predicting a future eclipse is to take tables that have been formed over hundreds of years of careful observation, and any observer can make their own tables. If you collect the calendars of the last 40 years, the time of the eclipses, and each year, they can be organized into a table. After examining the table, the observer will soon realize that there are cycles of eclipses that are repeated. When reaching eclipse number 19 or 20, they will see that it's a repetition of the first eclipses on the table, so following this method will be very easy to predict similar future eclipses. A lunar eclipse is formed when the Earth is between the Sun and the Moon, is what they tell us. The Earth then casts a shadow on the Moon, thus causing the eclipse. But this explanation has already been refuted by Frederick Henry Cook. In his book, The Terrestrial Plane, he writes, according to the new theory, the false one, a lunar eclipse occurs when the Sun and Earth and Moon are in a straight line. But it's documented that since the 15th century, more than 50 eclipses have occurred while both the Sun and Moon were still visible above the horizon. In other words, the Sun and the Moon were visible at the same time in the sky while the Moon was eclipsed. And this is the kind of thing that just gave me goosebumps. While the Moon was eclipsed, for example, on July 19th of 1750, in Paris, observers saw an eclipsed moon while the sun was clearly seen in the sky above the horizon. The same thing happened in the eclipses of April 20th in 1837. September 20th of 1700, June 16th of 1666, November 3rd of 1648, and July 17th of 1590. Also, a recent documented event occurred August 16th of 1989 in Hawaii, where the partially eclipsed moon could be seen rising while the sun was still setting. That means the sun, the earth, and the moon were not aligned while the lunar eclipse occurred. So it's impossible that the eclipse was caused by the earth's shadow being projected onto the moon. Another thing they say is that the solar eclipse occurs when the moon stands between the earth and the sun, the moon covering the exact circumference of the sun. This already improbable scenario is refuted by recordings where it can be seen that it's not the moon covering the sun during an eclipse, but rather something else, and we're going to have a look at that. On March 20th of 2015, a total eclipse of the sun took place, and the Travel Quest International Company organized a flight of 50 people to observe this phenomenon from the North Atlantic, and this is where the subject gets interesting. Several passengers filmed the totality of the eclipse, and the recordings show black orbs without light around the sun. And one of these orbs was covering the sun at the moment of the eclipse. Total solar eclipse, March 20th 2015. And here we can see a nice view through the window. And this is what I wanted to see. Something real. And something nice and up there, not from our perspective. And here we go. Boom. Now they come into view. The orbs that I've spoken about seeing. Orbs that can actually move independently, but otherwise move as fixed stars. And I told you of the one that flew over my head and then just parked in its position and just appeared to be a star. And of course we have things we are told that orbit in opposition. And here's an example. Here's 4 of them moving in opposition. And what I find fascinating is if this is true, which I believe it is, it seems a lot more plausible than anything I've ever heard on the subject. That means that the stars, or at least some of them, may actually move in front of the sun. And it's certainly the case here with these 4+ orbs. And here we can see it passing, and now we see the eclipse. And we still see the 3 underneath it. Absolutely amazing. And again, this was a group of photographers. It's not just one photographer. And here he helps highlight this, really showing you a lot of the points that many people might want to refute, such as the smudges on the window. And then he highlights these orbs so we can clearly see the way they move. And this just ties right into my last video where I was showing Emily Suzanne's time lapse of the luminaries and how they all just moved like a clock. And this just all rings so true to me. All the images I'd ever seen, even all the stuff on this platform that will pop up in the first few pages of searching, is all BS, just showing a false picture, doctored up. And this is what always perplexed me, is why I couldn't see the moon before. Even this last eclipse that I saw when I was working at the hospital. Why did I not see the moon approaching it? Well, that makes sense now. It was essentially an invisible orb until it reached this point, and then again became invisible. And again we have proof now that the moon has been out in historical records. We have proof that it's not the moon causing the eclipses, that there are other moons or luminaries that perhaps have burnt out, but still continue their path, true and predictable. And I had no doubt everything was going to tie in together. All of this, the history, the realm, the orbs. And then this creator explains that these were the images that were posted to the news from the same flight. And they were BS images. They had edited out the rest of the orbs. And again, even before I got to this point and to this video, so many of the videos were also edited. Certainly anything with over 100,000 views. And I was looking for videos with very little views, very amateur. But even then, I couldn't find what I've discovered here. And we've since seen lots of charts examining the old world, and even the clock in Prague doing a better job of explaining what's going on in a working model. The Royal Astronomical Society in June of 1850 wrote, "We must seriously doubt that the moon is the only satellite of the Earth." In the report of the Academy of Sciences on October 12, 1846, and again in 1947, the director of one of the French observatories showed a series of calculations and observations that led him to conclude the following. There is at least one non-luminescent celestial body of considerable size attached to the Earth as a satellite. The astronomer and mathematician Sir John Herschel admitted that there are invisible moons in the firmament. The president said the following: "The view is gaining popularity through and through that the stars were accompanied by large orbs that never emitted light. The best astronomer of our time sent me a letter in July of 1844. He said, 'I continue to believe that the stars Procyon and Sirius are really double stars, and that each is made up of a visible and invisible star. Painstaking research by Peter Sauber supports the belief that there are invisible stars in the sky. Johann Heinrich Lambert, a mathematician, physicist, astronomer, and philosopher, wrote that where there are large dark cosmic bodies, the existence of these non-luminescent orbs in the sky has been widely documented over the centuries. However, the elite hide the truth from us and instead show us computer graphics, techniques that are obviously no longer models that work with people who have woken up. When it comes to the mainstream, all they offer us is a false explanation of reality. And even in the case where we have some actual footage, we can see that they'll just edit them in order to present them on mainstream networks for the masses. So that was awesome. Let me know what you think. Finally making some sense, in my opinion, of what this orb phenomenon that has been experienced by so many may actually be. And I guess I'll go bonus. There's peace tonight. Why? Because my cat now has a bedtime. 9 o'clock, she goes into my other little house, her house, and I have peace until the morning. If I would have had children, I probably would have discovered this trick by now. Up until now, I've just been one of those pet owners that entertains a ruckus at all hours. And if my cat would have had a bedtime, she wouldn't have been out at 3 in the morning, fighting the way she did several months ago. How many people could live in this abandoned, melted village? How far underground does this network really go? Recently I watched a great video of the Mammoth Caves in Kentucky. But here I took a screenshot of the vast underground network found underground in Kentucky. And I'll try to stick a few pictures in here and show you just how square and perfect and building-like these tunnels are. And here a man has rammed his car into the White House. It looks like he did himself in, is what they're telling us. And I just wanted to know what the hell happened to this car. Looking like it's been blasted by a direct energy of some sort. And not a peep about the condition of this car. Just said he smashed into the wall and jumped out of the car, started firing, and did himself in. After all these years, I recognize a vehicle or even neighborhood that's been hit by the direct energy. And here I just wanted you to consider like a great Star Fort wall, or even the Great Wall of China, or the walls in California that I showed you recently in the Napa Valley. And I have found it amusing this whole time that America is trying to build a damn wall. And here's what their wall looks like. It's just an iron gate, essentially. The ugliest wall ever. And pretty stupid. I could climb this wall like a pole. And anyone who harvests coconuts could certainly climb this wall. And Arizona has gotten pissed off because they never finished the wall. So they're sticking shipping containers along it to fill in the gaps. Here you go. And you know, on this channel I like to focus on the finest architecture in the world. And I'm amused at our efforts to do anything today, to build anything. And here we go. Arizona building a wall. And even though this is just a hollow steel box, look how many people and amount of heavy machinery needed to build this pile of junk that's not even a wall, it's just shipping containers. This is the best we get in 2022. Again, consider the Great Wall of China without any technology, we are told. And here is the Great Wall of Arizona. And here people have been telling me in my comments about my last video that the shooting stars I was showing may have been airplanes. And that's fine, maybe they were airplanes. But everything I said still applies. And here in the news in Utah, a meteor was captured on camera and heard all throughout Utah. I heard it as well. But just today I'm seeing the story of what actually happened. There you can see it in the right corner. And essentially a meteor just shot across the sky like we see here. Now if this happened at night, it would appear as a shooting star. Here again we can see it shooting across. It even has a glow to it. And that was not a plane. And yet it was moving kind of slowly. Once my sister and her boyfriend and I saw a green meteor streak across the sky at a pretty slow speed, and it even made a sound. And it even had smoke that we could see, which was really strange. Here was one that just shot across some sort of mountain cam. Let's look at that again, and do look it up if you want to hear the sound that it made. I like to occasionally check out the news. And this same site, KSL, which is our kind of major Utah site, very biased, but still having pretty good coverage, was mentioning there was a tornado in my area a couple months ago. Nobody was injured. It was in a semi-remote area, about 15 miles away from my place. And it's funny because you might have heard me complaining about the wind for a month or two. And I was really nervous. It was the kind of wind that made me worry. And sure enough, a tornado had touched down, making me realize that my concerns were not unwarranted. And I guess I'll just end with these national capital columns. I've shown them before some years ago, and these are beautiful, beautiful columns. One solid piece. And if you could see the people standing next to these, they're just as massive as the ones we just looked at in San Francisco. And what sickens me is that they tell us they moved these. That these were originally at the Capitol, and they moved them during Capitol renovations. And no doubt, just one of these columns weighs as much as that shipping container that we just looked at. And you saw the heavy equipment they used to move the shipping container. And yet these were supposedly moved without heavy machinery. Now, in my opinion, these were here. These are the remains of a building. These steps and this water feature are simply a part of something else. And for this week, that's enough out of me. Thanks for being here. I love you all. God bless, and I'll see you next week.